Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this retreat on death and dying today. Before we begin this retreat, it's traditional that we begin with the chant. So if you know the chant, you may chant along with me. It's going to be Asatoma. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor ma Amritam Gamaya Avir Maeti Rudrayate Dakshina Mukham Tenamam Pahinityam Tenamam Pahinityam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through, and guide us evermore with thy loving presence. Om, peace. Peace, peace to all beings everywhere. Well, good morning, everyone. This at least morning from San Diego and wherever you may be. I'm Swami Namananda. I'll be your host for this event on death and dying. And let me start off by saying, some of you, maybe half of you, may have heard this before, but Swami Satyamayananda is new, and he hasn't heard this. So I'd like to tell, I'm speaking from San Diego, what does San Diego mean? And some of you may have known that there was a famous Swami, Swami Chinmayananda, from the Chinmayananda, who created the Chinmayananda mission. He actually passed away in San Diego. And I've heard his devotees define San Diego as, what does it mean? It's not Saint Diego, it's one meaning. Another meaning is San Diego, San Di-Ego, where the ego dies and you become a saint. And so I think they consider San Diego to be the Benares of America. Varanasi is a place in India where it's one of the few places where if you pass away there, you are guaranteed mukti. At least that's what some of our holy saints have said. So I think in some ways we consider that, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but some of us consider that this here. So let me start off by saying that today we are going to be talking about a very, very important topic. I think out of all the programs we've done here, I think this is probably the most important program that we are going to have. There is in the Mahabharata, which is an Indian epic, Dharma addresses Yudhishthira. Of all the wonders in the world, which is the most wonderful? And Yudhishthira says that no man, although he sees death all around him, feels that they are not going to die. Sometimes leads us to the question, what is the opposite of birth? Most people would say the opposite of birth is death. But is it truly death? Do we actually not live after giving up this body? Is our living presence extinguished? When I think about death, this morning, I was thinking about what was occurring to me was all the life experiences that I've had. As a Swami, a sannyas, there's a ceremony where we die to the world and we sort of ghost to the world. And I was thinking about that. We have this ceremony and, what does that mean in the way we view the world? When I was thinking about my life experiences, I was thinking about the things that have happened in my life, the people I've met, the pain that I've caused, the people who have helped me, the close ones, the gratitude I feel, all these life experiences I've had, I was thinking that if it was to end right now, would I be ready? I asked myself that question this morning. And the answer is no, for myself. I wouldn't be ready. There are things that I'm not prepared to let go of yet, from just being a very honest point of view. There are things that I haven't reconciled, things that I haven't put into order yet before I leave. You know, we as monks, although we are supposed to disconnect from our family, you'll find many of the monks who live in America, we still have relationships with our parents. And we feel it's our obligation to take care of our parents or what's going to happen to them. And in all of this, how do we prepare? How do we get our affairs in order so that when they pass away, for example, or when a loved one passes away, are we ready to let go? Do we have all the documents ready? Emotionally, how do we deal with the grieving process? At what point do we say goodbye from a medical point of view? There are a lot of questions that come up, and I find that what happens to me, it seems like for the majority of us, when death occurs, we're like thrown into an ocean, and we either sink or we swim. In India, my father used to tell me that they learn how to swim, especially in the villages. They throw you in the pond, and you just learn how to swim. You just start waving your hands, and somehow you start getting afloat. That seems to be the way here also. It's an issue we don't want to talk about. It's an issue we don't want to deal with, but yet it's a fact of life. So today, we're going to talk about this. We're going to open up. We're going to open it up from the closet, and we're going to expose it for what it is. And we have 4 experts this morning who are going to talk about the death, what to do before, during, and after, and how to look at it from a spiritual point of view, from a legal point of view, from a medical point of view, and from an emotional, consoling point of view. So I hope that you guys can stay around for the entire retreat. It's starting now, and it will expect to be this retreat to be about 4 hours. And what we're going to do is we're going to have the different speakers, beginning with Swami, and then Anthony, our lawyer, and then Dr. Patel, our medical director, and then Jillian, who's going to talk about the emotional aspect of death. Everyone has something beautiful to contribute and has something to enrich our process of wisdom that we can learn so that we can better prepare ourselves. That's what we want to take. What are you going to take home today? How can you better prepare yourselves to deal with your own mortality and to deal with our loved one, the mortality of our loved ones? So we're going to have each speaker roughly speak for about 30 minutes or so. We're going to open it up for 50 minutes of Q&A. And then we're going to go on to the next speaker. And at the end of everybody's talk, we're going to open it up to a general Q&A where you can ask your questions to everyone. So let us begin right now. First, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who is Swami Satyamayananda. He is the Assistant Minister of the Vedanta Society of Southern California. And many of you know him. He's spoken at our, he's given meditation retreats. He's quite a dynamic speaker. He's really studied psychology and spirituality. And so we're so fortunate today to have him speak about the death process from a spiritual point of view. Swami Satyamayananda.
Am I unmuted? Oh,
yes. Yes, Marsh, please go.
Okay. We plunge in right into the topic. Thank you for the introduction, Swami. Before we can start with the slides, I want to start with a chant. Om Kavim Puranam Manushasitaram Manoraniyam Samanusmaredya Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parasta. This is the verse from the Bhagavad Gita, which translates as, the person who meditates on the omniscient, the ancient, the ruler, more subtle than the subtlest, the ordainer of inconceivable form, effulgent as the sun and beyond darkness, that person attains this supreme Purusha, the supreme person. So this is the Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, 9th verse. We start with death, and death is reckoned as a great teacher. Swami Vivekananda says, when you have to walk the path of dharma, righteousness or religion, feel as if death has held you by your hair. Grihitaiva kesheshu mrityuna dharma macharit. So it's a teacher. It is also kala. It is time. And time has a tremendous influence on us. It is death in a way that we have to die every moment in order to live. Our cells are going decay every moment. So death is with us all the time. So we start with the first slide. Swami Harinamananda. Yeah. Next, please. Yes, this is Kala and the great teacher. Next, please. This is a chain of life as well as a chain of death. Life is locked in a constant battle of prey and predator. At times, the roles are reversed. The predator becomes a prey. This is the mighty food chain in this universe that balances everything. Death is food for someone, and food, we know, gives life. Next, please. Death is this massive fact that we should not ignore. In this world of ours, as well as it has shaped creation. The whole of creation is shaped by this fact. That's the reason why in the Bhagavad Gita, this world is called Martya Loka, the world of death. And as we see that the similarity between Martya and mortal. Next slide, please. And life, in order to survive, in order to avoid becoming food for others, has tried for millions of years to adapt, to avoid predators as well as the environment by learning how to fly higher, faster, build phenomenal strength, grow claws and fangs. They develop camouflage and hibernation. And there are some beetles also in New Zealand that partially die in winters and return back to life. This constant struggle to adapt has also given life its variety, its color, its richness, its sight and smell and taste and venom and so on. It has really made this life and this world beautiful. Next, please. Well, the rest of the nature's response has been to evolve into the staggering diversity and proliferation of our species. It has to survive itself, it has to have offspring. And we have seen that in the human beings, however, the inquiry has taken the form of there is this doubt. When a person dies, some say he exists, some say he does not exist. This is the famous verse in the Katha Upanishad. Yeyam prete vichikitsa manushye asti iti nayam asti iti. So this search in the Katha Upanishad is personalized in the form of inquiry, of taking the form of Nachiketa, a young boy, a seeker, questioning the god of death, Yamraj. So in human beings, there is a rise of inquiry. Next slide, please. Human consciousness is unique. You all know what it is, because we can inquire of its own demise, because it has reached to such a point in its evolution where it can visualize its own inevitable death. Besides that of seeing death around, and besides also having such seminars, we can inquire. Next. Another reason why we are instinctively afraid of death is because, as the Yoga Sutras say, that the 5 obstructions to yoga are non-knowledge, egotism, attachment, revulsion, and the fear of death, abhinivesha. Swami Vivekananda says that all our knowledge has come from experience, and we have experienced death. Therefore, before, that is why we are instinctively afraid. Next, please. So this inquiry about death is what actually leads us to rituals and burial doctrines and mythology and philosophy. Everything actually centers around the question of death. What happens? Where has this person gone? And in the earliest rituals found in human society in prehistoric time was burial tombs. People were buried with honor and people were mourned. So this death was actually the beginning of all religions. So these 3, seeing our own demise or death in the future, the instinctive fear of death, and always there's an element of uncertainty. This has been the beginning of all inquiry, of all religion. Next, please. Nobody can stop death. We can merely delay it. We don't need to be under any kind of illusions. It needs to be emphasized, however, whether death is sudden or gradual, it never comes unannounced. Let me emphasize this. Death never comes unannounced. One has dreams, premonitions, reminders, an underlying illness prompting us to take note. This premonition or foreboding of death is present in order that we prepare to meet it. That is why death, Yamaraj, is known to be compassionate. Not the terror that one finds in Western literature, that of a hooded, grim reaper. It is obvious that when the body dies, that which animates the body also ceases to exist along with the mind. This animating force or vital force is called prana. Next. Prana or life force has a wide range of functions to keep this organism alive. It is prana that enlivens matter and is sandwiched between mind and matter. This is the reason why bodies are endowed with life and consciousness. In Vedanta terminology, prana forms the covering or sheath called the pranamaya kosha that lies between the annamaya kosha, layer made of food or matter, and manomaya kosha, the mind sheath. The other two for the record are Vijnanamaya and Anandamaya kosha. So we have one sheath within another. There are like 5 coverings of the soul. So if you see that diagram, it shows exactly what the sheaths are like. Next. There's one principal prana is divided into 10 functions, but for our purpose, there are 5 main ones. Each function overlaps with the others. Prana, which moves upwards, has a seat in the chest and is felt more at the tip of the nose. Apana, which moves down from the navel to the rest of the body, is felt more near the organs of excretion. Vyana moves all over the body and pervades it. This gives the body its warmth. Samana metabolizes food and drink and distributes it all over the body, and it's felt in the center of the body. Udana, the ascending force that keeps the body buoyant and helps the jivatman, the soul, pass out of the body. It is felt mostly in the throat. Next. These are the currents within these systems of prana. You have the left nostril and the right nostril. The left is Ida and the right is Pingala. Just keep that in mind. For purpose of illustration, we know that the oceans are alive and thriving because there are massive currents in the ocean that move and churn water in great quantities while distributing nutrients and other stuff around. When these ocean currents move near the colder regions of the Arctic or the Antarctic circles, the water cools. These cold waters sink. As these cold currents move towards warmer climates or land masses near the equator or tropics, they become warmer by degrees and begins to rise. Similarly, the Ida, symbolized as the moon, is the cool current, and Pingala is the sun current, the warm current. They rise and descend, forming a loop from the head to the base of the spine, crisscrossing each other at each center of consciousness called chakras or lotuses or plexuses. In reality, however, there's only one current that rises and descends. So this has to be kept in mind. The lowest form of center of consciousness is the Mooladhara or the sacral plexus. If you look at the diagram, you'll see that Mooladhara. The next is you have something called a Swadhisthana. And the next is Manipura at the navel. Then we have Anahata at the chest, Vishuddha at the throat, and Agnya at the center of the eyebrows. The highest is Sahasrara. So here at the circulation of Ida and Pingala moves up and down this. So prana is kind of traversing in the body through these two main currents, like ocean currents. We have water as well as we have currents in them. So prana enlivens everything and forms a kind of a loop within you. Next. As the body gets weakened or diseased or is suddenly mowed down by an accident, then comes the first stage, which is external. Just as a heavily loaded cart goes on rumbling, so does the self that is in the body, being presided over by the Supreme Self, goes on making noises when breathing becomes difficult. This is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. I remember being at the death time of a Swami in Bengaluru. His breathing was very labored. And a few of us were around and we are chanting the Bhagavad Gita as well as the names of Shri Ramakrishna. We placed a picture of Shri Ramakrishna on his chest, and almost after 4 hours of labored breathing, the Swami took one long deep breath and it was over. When Shri Ramakrishna's nephew Akshay passed away, Shri Ramakrishna saw his subtle body along with the soul emerge out like a sword coming out of the sheath. We will see what it is in the second stage. Next, please. Once again, to take the quotation from one of the oldest Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, when the self becomes weak and senseless, seen from the outside, as it were, the sense organs come to it, the sensory organs, completely withdrawing these particles of light. It comes to the heart. When the presiding deity of the eye turns back from all sides, the person fails to notice color. The eye becomes united with the subtle body. Then people say, he does not see. The nose becomes united. Then they say, he does not smell. In a similar manner, all the organs merge in the subtle body. The intellect then becomes united, and then they say, he does not know. Then the top of the heart center brightens. Through that brightened top, the self departs, either through the eye or through the head or through any part of the body. When the individual self departs, prana follows. And when the prana departs, all the organs follow. Then the self has particularized consciousness and goes to the body which is related to that consciousness. It is followed by knowledge, karma, and past experiences. So we'll break this up stage by stage of what the Upanishads have presented to us of the death processes. We all have seen how a tree falls down. First it sways, it creaks, and then it comes crashing to the ground, sometimes exposing most of its root system. The tree falls and dies, but in a way it is still alive, for the residue of the sap is still present within it. After a few hours, even after a few days, then the leaves gradually start turning their color, and then the smaller twigs and the branches and then everything else shrivels up. The stem, however, has still a little life because of its girth, its width. That too then slowly dies. Next. We will go through the sequences of death now. Like when a tree that sways and creaks is about to fall. In a dying person, there is agitation in the body as the 5 pranas that are diffused all over by 72,000 nadis, nerves. They are called hita. These are subtle currents which are now being retracted. As the retraction goes, the process begins, there is agitation in the body. These are the first signs of death. These hita nadis spread out like a fishnet all over the body and are extremely fine, like a hair split up into 1,000 parts. These nadis, these nerves, are filled with white, blue, brown, green, and red color. This depends on your knowledge, your work, your karma, and experiences. The Katha Upanishad, however, gives us 101 nerves. The one nerve is the Shushumna and leads to liberation. If one leaves the body through it, the other 100 lead us to the worldly state. At this retraction stage, due to some bad karma working itself out, it is accompanied by pain and terror. It is here that the person feels uncertain, terror, and pain. In case the person has lived an ethical life, she or he can extend this period at times for even days. So the retraction in some people is sudden, in some people it is gradual, and in some people it can be delayed. But the process has, however, begun. Next, please. The Ida and the Pingala currents, which are crisscrossing down the centers of consciousness, they slow down. And when they slow down, they enter within you, inside, and become subtle. All the pranas which earlier had gross manifestations now operate on a very subtle level, as if it's getting interiorized. As these subtle pranas become feeble, the senses stop functioning and are absorbed in the mind, which still has some internal awareness. It is at this stage that all the scenes of one's thoughts and words and actions flash in the mind. Everything is kind of compressed and they come and flash in front of you in a huge sequence. The predominant thoughts or the predominant character etched on the mind prevails. There are times when seeing these external signs of immobility after some jerking and thrashing movements, so when the prana is being withdrawn by the nerves, hita nerves, there is sometimes thrashing and sometimes you can say moaning. And then there's stillness, immobility. So people see that and think, oh, the person has died. No, that person has not yet died. Because there are cases when the person revives after even being thought of or declared as dead. The contents of the hita nadi then once again expand. In most cases, it was kind of a wrong call or a signal of further things to come. It must have come as a sense of teaching you something. Next, please. It is here that death comes. After this, after the hita nadis have been withdrawn, then death comes, like the falling of the tree. At this point, the respiration, which is very feeble, stops completely, and there is no pain. There is confusion and fear for the unenlightened. But those who lived life correctly, there is a sense of great release and joy. The subtle udana prana, vayu, rises, taking the jivatman, the individual soul. We find in the sacred literature, as also in near-death and out-of-body experiences, you see an illustration like of somebody is experiencing something. But generally, the example given is like a horse that pulls and drags out the pegs or the ropes that it has been tied to. That is how Udana pulls out everything. As the Udana rises, it drags along the other pranas and withdraws into the Vijnanamaya Kosha, the sheath of intelligence, the top which brightens. This is the stage of particularized consciousness, where the dominant thoughts of your life are now manifest. The body now loses its kind of buoyancy, its lightness, and becomes progressively heavier. It is here that many have that experience of visions of light and tunnel, a divine being coming, and so on. You can hear sounds and music, and everything is so beautiful. This is the stage where you have this experience. The death experience, the actual death experience is painless. Please remind yourself, the actual experience is painless. It is full of joy. Next, please. In case there are cases when people who leave the body and they have such visions, they are asked sometimes to return. And because there is a residue of the prana still operating, like the sap of a tree that takes a while to dry, that person can re-enter into the body and through the nadis, to the nerves. And that nerves then again re-expand and go about all over the body. So there are people and there are instances when the person meets death and returns. The next stage is as the samana vayu leaves, all metabolic processes stop here. The next stage is now there is a command for cell apoptosis or cell death. I leave this because Dr. Sheila Patel will be speaking on this aspect. So, however, the process might take to about 40 to about 60 minutes till everything has stopped. So before cell death, organs are and can be harvested. In case there is a ventilator put, the organs can still remain for a while, oxygenated, and they can be harvested. That's the idea of organ donation. Next, please. As the residue, the subtle apana continues leaving, and this might take even sometimes from a few minutes to a few hours. So there is sometimes an evacuation of the bowels. The next stage is, the last one is Vyana Vayu. Now the heat of the body begins to leave in about 20 minutes after the actual death. And sometimes this Vyana Vayu can continue for sometimes up to about few hours. That is why the spinal cord is still felt to be warm, like the tree trunk is the last to wither away. However, the hair and the nails continue growing for some time, then the body becomes colder and rigor mortis sets in. Next, please. The classical way of death, as we know, the Bhagavad Gita says, as a person discards worn out garments and puts on new ones, so does the soul discard worn out bodies and puts on new ones. So the classical way is that at the time of death, having fully fixed the prana between the eyebrows with an unswerving mind and being imbued with devotion, as also the strength of yoga, that one reaches the resplendent supreme Purusha person, Bhagavad Gita. Prayana kale manasa chalena bhaktya yukto yoga balena cheva. This is the so here the commentary by Shankaracharya is, after first bringing the chitta, that is the mind stuff, under control in the lotus of the heart, here in the center of the heart, and then lifting up the prana through the nerve going upwards, Sushumna, by gradually getting control over the tanmatras, the very subtle elements of earth, water, fire, air, and space. These are the subtle elements that the soul gets control over it. This very subtle prana then is completely fixed between the eyebrows without losing concentration in an unwavering mind. The yogi, possessed of such strength and wisdom, imbued with bhakti, as also with the strength of yoga, consisting in the steadfastness of the chitta, resulting from the accumulation of samskaras or impressions from deep concentration, reaches that supreme luminous Purusha. So that yogi takes the prana, lets it through the Sushumna Nadi, that subtle, puts it between the eyebrows, and the strength and the devotion and the yoga necessary are tremendous. That person completely conquers all the rudimentary elements of matter. And that's the reason why the person does not need to have another embodiment. And then thinking of that supreme Purusha here, the person leaves the body. This is the classical way of dying. We stop here for questions. I know there are a few questions that have come in. Some of the questions have already come in, and some of the questions have been kind of answered in this presentation. However, to answer a few questions that had come by email, I will start with the first one from Sam Mahanta. It is said that one thinks about God at the time of death, that person is liberated. And whatever one thinks at the time of death, that determines the soul's next destination. But what if one dies in coma or unconscious state? Then what happens? Well, the internal consciousness is never lost. A person in coma also, as we know, there is a very slight response there. The person inside is aware. So in case there is absolutely no awareness, then that person gets into what is called darkness. Asurya namate loka andena tamasavta. That person enters darkness. In case there is a slight awareness within, that person will leave the body according to that predominant thought. What happens at the time between one's death and the next birth? Well, those who now believe in reincarnation, Holy Mother says you've got to stay at least 1 year in a disembodied state. So that's what happens. In case there is an immediate embodiment, then they say like a leech that crawls up to the stalk of grass, pulls another stalk of grass towards it, and leaves of the first one, gets hold of the second one. So does this soul throw off this body and clings to the next body. Question from Arjak Bhattacharya. In case of normal death, what is the best possible way to die happily and without any desire? Thus, we can cut the bonds of karma. Well, devotion to God is the best possible way to die happily. Yes. So keep on doing that. It cuts all bonds of karma. The next question is, in case of family members' death, what is the best spiritual way to accept it and move on? Death is a fact. Death is a fact. You got to accept it first. And remember that this is a teacher also to you. Because sooner or later, you too are going to undergo that same process. Then third question from Arjak is, if there is a rebirth and we want to achieve enlightenment in the next life, what should be our thought processes during a death? Well, thinking of God or thinking of the soul or thinking of reality is the best way to exit the body. So if say the question was, if there is a rebirth, yes, and we want to achieve enlightenment in the next life, try to achieve enlightenment in this life. Enlightenment does not come in one life, Arjak. There is a long series of efforts spanning sometimes lifetimes. So by the grace of Sri Ramakrishna, if you have the desire for enlightenment, Sri Ramakrishna will give you that enlightenment. Surrender to Sri Ramakrishna and don't wait for the next embodiment. Whatever you have to do it now. We have another question, a longish one from Shivani Nandi. The question is, does meditation and being in touch with one's spiritual self help those who go on to develop dementia? If so, how? Would you be able to share any examples from this experience of other Swamis from Belur Mutt or other Vedanta centers in the US who have been victims of this devastating mind-robbing disease? Yes, it's the longest question. Let me break it up. The body undergoes karma, and the soul is actually affected by that karma when it identifies itself with it. Now, there have been Swamis who have suffered from dementia and they slowly lose their mind, as it were. But their spiritual practices are so strong. That is what keeps them afloat. They never lose that constant remembrance of the Lord. They may forget your name. They may forget even who they are and what are they doing. But I have seen Swamis even repeating the name of God when everything else has become blank. So there have been cases, and we take this not very seriously. There have been cases when the body, which is undergoing some form of karmic retribution, does undergo this dementia. So the next part of the question is, can they overcome physical pain by diverting their thoughts from it? Yes. You can divert the physical pain as the hita nadis, the nerves, which are drawing in, being retracted. That's the painful aspect. But only for those who have some karma left to kind of work out. Those who have lived a very ethical life, for them the transition is very smooth. There's no pain. And as we have mentioned, the actual experience is painless. So people are calm. They are not diverted by pain. And this is how they kind of leave the body. So the next question, spiritual question from Adrij with Roy. Do we have limits to our life? Yes. Can we go on one day beyond that limit? No. Everyone has to die. Does death is predestined by God? No. By your own karma and by the laws of nature. Is that predestined by birth? Yes, when you are born, you have a kind of a certain span of life that is kind of given to you according to your karma that fructifies. So what is the next question is saying? By your karma, is it predestined by karma or in a past life? Your past karma fructifies into this karma. Okay, so this whole universe is a universe of karma. Do it rightly, you escape karma. Do it wrongly, you need to kind of relearn your lessons. Harinamananda, do we have a little more time? We have some questions.
5 more minutes. 5 more minutes.
Okay. So we have a few more questions that are here from Jayanti, saying we have pre and post death practices and customs. Yes, these death rituals are extremely important. When the person emerges out, if there isn't adequate steam, as it were, there's no kind of fuel in the rockets, or the karma is not strong enough, that person kind of gets stuck in a plane of or a dimension where that person needs help. And here, death rituals, prayers, all these help, because that person is kind of stuck up in a semi-darkness. And when your prayer or the rituals, they, as it were, reach out to that person there in the darkness, and that person feels comforted. That's the reason why these death rituals are extremely important, and they are found in all religions and all cultures. There is a period of confusion, of entering into darkness, and whatever comfort that person can derive from the family members or from relatives or from friends is extremely important and is extremely helpful for the soul. Okay. Can we stop here? Because we still have some questions, which of course we can kind of, I'll just take up one. Anjali Khanetkar says about there is something called one Vayu Prana, that life force, which is called Dhananjaya, it kind of hovers around the dead body, you know. That prana actually, Dhananjaya, is actually responsible for nourishing the body. There are the sub pranas, apart from the 5 main pranas that we have seen. So here, these sub pranas, amongst them, one of them nourishes the body. But when Udana is yanked out, everything else goes along with that individual soul, which is clothed, as it were. It puts on the cloak of prana, it puts on the cloak of the mind, it puts on the cloak of the intellect, and it now ready to depart. So there is a kind of a presence. It hovers about it for about sometimes 20 minutes after the actual process of death occurs. Yes. So we can stop here for.
Thank you, Swamiji. I think at this point, there are people who want to ask questions, but I think right now, Maharaj, we're going to continue to the next
Yes.
speaker. And those that have questions, please just wait at the end of the program. We're going to open it up to a big Q&A dialogue. I suggest write down your question on a piece of paper right now so you won't forget it, right? And then you can ask that question at the end of this session here. All right, thank you so much, Swamiji, for this excellent presentation on death. We will see you shortly during the Q&A session.
Sure.
I'd like to invite now our next speaker, which is Mr. Anthony Kornarens, and he is the General Counsel of the Vedanta Society of Southern California. He is a litigator by profession. He's so closely connected with our Vedanta Society. He has given hours and hours and hours of just unselfish karma yoga in helping our center. And he's been practicing law for many, many years. And today he's going to address the legal aspects, which are really, really important, from how to trust, a will, what happens when a person passes away, what type of documents do you need so you don't have to go into probate, how can we ease the tensions of family relationship by getting our papers straight. And he's going to go through these different things. So I'd like to welcome Anthony so much for coming and volunteering his time and sharing now in his presentation.
Thank you, Swami. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Very good. I'm also a member of the Board of Trustees and a devotee with a lot of firsthand experience in the legal aspects of death and dying. I'm not a probate lawyer. I'm not a specialist in probate law. I'm not a tax planner. So what I'm going to do is to give you an overview of things you can think about based on probate and trust cases I've litigated, my own personal near-death experience, the near-death experience of others close to me and how I was able to help them make arrangements, and also the deaths of people close to me. In other words, life experiences tempered with the law, of course. The focus of my presentation will be how to be prepared in advance for the death of the body without being overly distracted by worldly things. I think that's the most key point. Prepare so you're not distracted. How to let go of those things. What legal vehicles are available to do this. Things to consider in organizing your affairs. And there's an overarching concern from my point of view, and that's to try to avoid controversy and complications for your loved ones and those to whom you wish to leave bequests. Because the extent and manner to which you prepare now to leave your body can be one of the greatest gifts you leave to those whom you love. And some questions I've been asked to address, as Swami has alluded to, what documents can be prepared now, what arrangements can be made to take care of financial assets, and what legalities have to be provided for after death, and when should these arrangements be made. And I'm going to start with the last point first, which is when should these arrangements be made? They should be made now, as soon as possible, because here maybe surprisingly, the spiritual and the legal are quite intertwined. Swamiji says, you'll learn that the soul never dies, therefore have no fear of death. So don't be afraid of death. Plan for your death now and focus on the cremation ground, because that's an important spiritual act as well as legally prudent. That will enable you to let go of things that you don't need when you leave the body, and you frankly don't need them now. You need to be focused when you die on God, not on your children fighting, not on what's going to happen to your property, not on what you didn't do in this lifetime to plan for leaving the body. So this is so critical. And planning now is an act of love and selflessness. Make your arrangements now. So let's now get into the arrangements. Please plan your last illness now if you can. And as long as we're healthy, we can communicate our wishes and act on them. We should each take advantage of this. So there are a number of documents that you can do or get into to plan your last illness. One of them is called an advance directive for healthcare. This is very important. It tells physicians and family members what your wishes are. For example, do you want your life prolonged by artificial means? What kind of medical treatment do you want? Who is your primary care physician? Who do you want making decisions for you if you cannot? Are you willing to donate organs, tissues, and body parts? What do you want done with your remains? Now, there's a California form for this, and it's a very simple form. It's easy to locate and fill out, and it contains questions that will cause you to think about your wishes and the needs of those who you care about. So that's one thing. Advance directive for healthcare, and I've helped a number of people fill these things out. It's not legally difficult, but it raises questions that are very important to think about. There's another one that's related to that. It's called the durable power of attorney for healthcare decisions. Durable power of attorney for healthcare decisions. And most of us are not entirely certain as to when we will leave the body or what kind of condition we'll be in. And some of us will develop dementia or have other conditions that impede our thoughts. Maybe it's simple denial, who knows? But we should try to plan for that. In other words, some loss of mental capacity in a thoughtful and loving way now. So you should designate someone who you trust and believe understands your wishes to make those decisions if you cannot. And again, if you can make those decisions at or towards the very end, you won't need this. But if you cannot, don't leave it to chance. So if you designate somebody, please talk it over with them. See if they're willing to serve, see if they're willing to help, and choose a backup as well. And if you don't do that, persons who may not agree with your beliefs or who do not have your best interests and your needs in mind may become involved. For example, if you lack capacity, a court can appoint someone, potentially even a stranger or a professional, to become involved in making key decisions about your body and your treatment. And you might say to yourself, well, that really doesn't matter because I'm not aware of it anyway, I'm gone. But as we've heard from Swami, you're not gone, you're still there. So the choices you make can really impact what's happening to your body and therefore impact your passing. Make them now, call upon those whom you trust to help you now. And even though it may never come to pass, at least there's some preparation for it. There's also a simple form called Do Not Resuscitate. This is a form that's filled out before complicated procedures, and it tells people what your wishes are if you do not want to be resuscitated after cardiopulmonary arrest. And that's important because medical professionals have a legal responsibility to keep your body alive, even if you're not functioning mentally and are not really present, unless you direct them not to do so. Now, if you direct them not to do so via this form, then they have to follow your wishes. And if those are your wishes, make them known now and document them. That's so important. There's another document called a durable power of attorney for financial decisions. And you should look at this as being important whether or not you have a lot of money or a lot of assets. So you may become unable to handle your finances. Plan for this now by appointing someone whom you trust to take on this role if needed. Decide what responsibilities you want them to have. Those responsibilities can include just about anything and everything, or can include very little. And ask them if they're willing to do this for you. Think about this now. Because what you do not want to have happen, and this, I've seen this a lot, I've litigated these cases a lot, and they're very painful. You have people who, let's just say, aren't focused on the right thing and are focused on worldly things, and they come in and they maybe feel a sense of entitlement to someone's home, to someone's car, to someone's guitar collection, whatever worthy or worldly possession someone has. And they're not necessarily bad people, but they come in and they have entitlement senses of that for whatever reason, and it can create chaos. And again, confront these issues now. Think about your children, think about family members, think about maybe how they've been disappointed, and try to help them. Help them to stay out of trouble, basically, so your passing can be much more smooth. And you also have to think about where you're going to be physically when you leave the body. And as COVID-19 shows, this can't always be controlled. You can have a car accident, who knows what will happen, but you can influence this. So do you want to be at home? Do you want to be in a convalescent home? Do you want to be in a hospital? Do you want to be in a hospice? Think about this early, know that death is inevitable, and try to make a plan. Now, just because you say, I want to be at home, it does not mean it will be the case. But if you think about it and make those arrangements in advance, perhaps you can be at home. Otherwise, there's a whole legal system that says he or she can't be at home anymore. They have to go to a hospital. Now we can't take care of this person. They have to go to a hospice. You get shuttled around. Sometimes you go from one hospital to another. Try to at least have some influence over that process. And there are ways to do that. I don't want to get into specifics because it is specific as to each person, but talk to people about it. Put your wishes in writing. Also plan for immediately after death. What kind of a service do you want? How do you want your body disposed? If you're going to be buried or interred, where? If cremated, do you want your ashes scattered? What kind of a ceremony do you want? Organ donation, as we've heard about and as we will hear more about. Do you want to do so? Put this in writing, discuss it with the persons whom you trust. Think about these things now, because if you don't and it happens ad hoc, it may not be what you wanted, it may not be the best thing. Now all of this should be in writing. Everything I've talked about in some way, shape, or form, and I'll talk about the legal instruments in a few moments, but you can verbally share your wishes with trusted persons. I know my mother did with her kids. She said, if you keep me alive by artificial means, I will come back and haunt you. So you will not do that. All right, so she did that. But she also put it in writing. That was prudent because who knows, maybe her kids weren't around at the time. We were, but nothing substitutes for written evidence, especially where there will be non-family members involved in the process. And also, some things need to be in writing to be legally enforceable if there's disagreement among the survivors. Now, what I've seen is that if the survivors agree, it all works out anyway. But the survivors don't always agree, or maybe they have legitimate disagreements. So if you put it in writing, it really is an act of compassion. You're sort of directing the show, as it were, after you have left your body, the show being what happens to the things you have physically left behind. Those things are far less important, but nonetheless, they do matter. You may want to hire a lawyer. It's not necessary. It really depends on how complicated your estate plan is. And whatever you do, and this is really something that's overlooked frequently, make copies of your estate planning documents and put them in places where they can be located. Don't leave it for someone to say, oh, where is that signed trust document? And I've seen situations where that signed trust document ends up in the oddest places. And in this one instance that I'm thinking about, it was found, but there are other times when it's not found. So have a safe deposit box. Make a list showing where the safe deposit box is. If you have a CPA, give it to the CPA. If you have a trusted monastic, give it to the monastic if the monastic is willing to take possession of it. You don't have to ask people to open it. You don't have to show it to people. You don't have to parade around your last wishes, but make sure those documents can be found. And there's a whole body of case law talking about spoliation of wills, meaning wills disappear because some people want them to disappear. I hate to be negative, but make sure that doesn't happen. Dissuade people from being tempted to do the wrong thing by preventing them from being able to do so. And at minimum, make a video or a recording or a handwritten will, but do not rely on them to be honored if you have not taken the other steps I've already discussed. Now, other things that you can do, and these are very practical things. It's basic consideration, really, for your loved ones and for whoever is going to have to be responsible. And somehow, as a lawyer, I end up being responsible for things where people haven't done this. Make a list of your assets so they can easily be located. So how about a list of your bank accounts? Put your important papers somewhere in more than one place. Leave codes to your computer unless you don't want things seen. Have a safe deposit box. Tell people what bank it's in. Again, speaking of my mother, she made a list of everything valuable and said where everything was. She organized everything. She made her wishes known, and she made it much easier on her children than it otherwise would have been. Another thing that people do, and I had this happen recently, a friend who was not supposed to survive a surgery, who did. But he gave away a lot of his things when he was still alive. And I saw him doing it a couple of years ago and realized something was really wrong, but he wouldn't talk about it. But so I took possession of all these things that he gave to me, and I gave them all back. Anyway, I was very happy to be able to do that. So give away things if you want to. Now, if you don't want to, don't. If you want to hang on to them, do. But frankly, letting go of those things gets you closer to that cremation ground, that spiritual cremation ground, and it's perhaps good for you. But be a little bit careful, though, when you're giving things away. This is where it gets tricky, especially if you're elderly. Because maybe you start giving one thing to one person and someone else says, hey, my brother got X, I want Y. You don't want to create a rush for your worldly things. It's weird. You have to feel that out, and you have to be compassionate and considerate in this process. You have to keep in mind what you might be opening up, what Pandora's box you might be opening up. So if you start giving things away, think about whether it will make your life more complicated or whether that action will bring you closer to God. Only you know that. Get some advice from a Swami if you need to, but think about that. Letting go is a good thing. But if you're elderly or you're somehow disabled, keep also in mind that there are things called elder abuse laws. So if people accept your things, and someone else later says you shouldn't have gotten those things, not you, but the person who accepted the gift, they can actually sue for elder abuse. So what you leave behind is a bunch of lawsuits and legal chaos. So if you give something away, make your wishes known, document it, do a video. And I'll use, just as a euphemism, I guess this pen. Make a video saying, I am giving this cherished pen to a dear friend of mine because I want this person to have it because he was there for me when I needed him to be there. The pen being a symbol of anything you're giving away. So let people know what you're doing if you choose to do that. Don't be sloppy about it, please.
Anthony,
yes.
You mentioned video. That's sort of new for most of us. Why is it more important to make a video than do it legal, than just like write it out and have a legal document like that? Why do you mention video?
Swami, if you're giving something away, I'm not talking about an estate plan now. I'm talking about getting things out of ownership before you pass away. That would not be an estate plan. And yes, a video is so much better because one can see one's affect. In other words, if you've written something out, perhaps something has typed it for you, they've put the pen in your hand and helped you to sign it. That could be the argument. Oh, that's elder abuse. I've litigated many of these cases where people who had diminished capacity signed things not knowing what they were doing. And I've litigated cases where they absolutely knew what they were doing, but somebody said, no, you didn't know what you were doing. The best evidence there is the video. They're looking right in the eye to the camera and they're saying, I want my friend to have this pen because he was there for me when I needed him. And this is a gift that I am making, knowing that I know what I'm doing with full capacity. In other words, just like we're communicating by video as opposed to just typing things back and forth, it's a far better form of communication so that someone can assess later if there's ever an issue, whether the gift was voluntary. That's why.
Thank you, Anthony.
Oh, sure. So let's do the flip side. If you're giving things away, or even if you don't want to give things away, but people are coming around, don't let anybody pressure you. Document your decisions and tell the people close to you why you made those decisions. And by the way, you could do this as well in terms of your estate plan. You could call your loved ones around you and say, here's the reason why I've chosen not to give anything to any of you, or whatever your decision is. And that helps you to confront things. Perhaps then you can have discussions that you needed to have. You can shed some karma. I'm not going to obviously focus on the spiritual because of my role as a lawyer, but the spiritual underlies all of this. So disposing of your estate in legally enforceable ways, it's very important because it can help you to have peace of mind and avoid disputes after you've left your body. It allows you to pass on your property as you see fit, rather than having the laws of government control this. And by the way, I want to tell you, if you have no estate plan, if you have no will, then your property passes on something that's called intestate succession. And it goes to family members under a formula set forth in the laws of the state you live in. So it's a one-size-fits-all paradigm. It may not be for you, but it's a default mechanism. So you're ceding control. And if you have no family members, no cousins, no nephews, it goes to the government. So most of you want an estate plan since it allows you to decide who gets what. And again, we're not talking necessarily about economic value, although people come out of the woodwork the larger the estate is. But you might have things that matter to you or that matter to other people. So deal with those things. Let go of those things. You're just using them anyway while you're in this body. And even if you don't think your heirs are going to argue about your property, a properly drafted estate plan can also save money. You can avoid taxes. And by the way, it doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. Many states have pre-printed forms. California certainly does that you can fill out and have witnessed. If your situation is more complicated, and that's usually due to a lot of assets, you can hire a lawyer to draft something for you. And things to consider. And I'm just going to identify issues because I really don't want to give specific legal advice. Do you live in a community property state like California? And if so, don't assume that your spouse will automatically get everything if you don't leave a will. That's not true. In California, the spouse gets 50% of your share of the community property, and the other 50% goes to heirs. This is intestate succession. So if you want your spouse to get absolutely everything, make sure that you have an estate plan saying so. Do you have property held as separate property that's not community property, or are you not married? You've got to provide for a disposition of it. Do you have property held in joint tenancy? That means there's more than one owner. Well, then it automatically goes to the other joint tenant, for the most part. Is it tenancy in common? Then it doesn't. So each of these things has unique treatment on death, and that's why a will or a trust is important. And also, some people, and this is interesting, they just basically say, all right, I'll use it as an example. I've got 3 children. I want each of my kids to have 1/3 of what I own. Well, that's fine. If the kids get along, or if you want to teach the kids to get along after you've left your body, do it that way. but maybe there's dad's watch. Okay, here. No problem. My brother said, you can take dad's watch. But in another family, perhaps that watch would have been the cause of years of acrimony. Think about those things. And think about whether you want to have a role in it. Maybe you don't. Maybe you want to teach the brothers to get along and have them argue over who gets what possession of dad's. But think about those things. It's an act of compassion and love. All right, turning to wills. A will is just what it sounds like. It's an instrument that says, here's what I want done with my property when I die. The thing about a will is it generally requires probate, which means you have to open a court proceeding, which means it costs money. And also if the estate is large, estate taxes have to be paid. Certain estates can be disposed of fairly easily by will, but a lot of times it's not the best way. The more common way nowadays is a trust document. It's called a trust. And you can have a revocable trust. That's one that you can set aside during your lifetime. Or you can have an irrevocable trust. They have different tax treatment. I'm looking at my stopwatch, which I accidentally stopped. Oh, I'm up to 23 minutes. Okay, good. I'm used to this. I have deadlines when I argue in front of court, so I tend to watch the watch. Okay, a revocable trust, you can change your mind and set it aside. An irrevocable trust, you cannot. And an irrevocable trust takes your property out of, okay, a little complicated, but a revocable trust, your creditors can still get at the assets. If it's in an irrevocable trust, your creditors can't. Hopefully you don't have those problems, because then you're not focused on death and dying, you're focused on hanging onto your property, which is probably not the best place to be ever. You'll have to, if you have a complicated financial situation, talk to a lawyer about that. But something that people often overlook, and this is really, really important, and that's a special needs trust. You can set something like that up to make sure that adult children with disabilities are cared for. And they can really work miracles, because you might have someone whom you love and care about, and the second you leave them all the property that you want them to have, guess what happens? They lose all their governmental benefits, because now they have assets. So you've done a nice thing, but you've taken away their government benefits and replaced them by private benefits. Now, if you want to do that, that's fine, but don't inadvertently do that. If you do it via a special needs trust, then they can get government benefits as well as have their financial needs met through the trust. Again, think about your own situation. And by the way, if you have parents or loved ones, if you're not planning on leaving the body anytime soon, talk to them about it as well, but do it in a loving, compassionate way. So special needs trusts are complex, but if you handle it early, it's very doable. And a well-written trust can help you to avoid probate. That keeps the courts out of your affairs. It keeps your affairs out of the public record. And generally the way it works is you make yourself the beneficiary of the trust. So you set up a trust, you make yourself the beneficiary, and really nothing changes in your lifetime. It's just a name, as long as you've transferred all your assets into that trust. But you then designate successor beneficiaries who will own the assets when you're gone. And again, you can be really specific about it. You can say, I want this friend to have my piano. I want this friend to have this guitar. I want this friend to have this car. I want this friend to have this bank account. Or you can just say, divide it 1/3 or divide it 1/5, divide it what's called impari passo, which is just basically proportional division of assets. So like a will, you can divide up your assets largely as you wish. But consider how well your beneficiaries get along now. I've seen so many situations, and sadly I'm brought in as a lawyer, where they're fighting over how much was the Ferrari worth, how much was the Maserati worth. This one case I have in mind had nothing to do with people from Vedanta. Somebody left his classic car collection to his friends to decide how to divide up his cars. Only one of them cared about cars. The other ones didn't care about cars. And it just turned into a complete food fight. And I say that as a euphemism for litigation, lawyers, and lots of money. This person didn't think it out properly, probably didn't have the right legal advice. but he probably left his body thinking everything was fine. So maybe it was okay, but certainly his wishes were not met, and his friends wound up not getting along, to put it mildly. So keep in mind that anything you leave up to others to decide after you've left your body can lead to arguments if there's more than one beneficiary. Now, if there's only one beneficiary, it's probably a different story, but even then, keep that in mind. Perhaps your beneficiary is not as mature as he or she might be in the future. Well, then you want an independent trustee, and you want to say, beneficiary, you only get a certain amount of money every year until you turn 25 or 30. And then you get everything. Or maybe you get a third after you turn 30, then you get a third after you turn 40. Just keep all of that in mind and think about it. Don't deny the inevitability of death, plan for it, and show your love for your loved ones through these actions. It really is a responsibility. It can also save taxes, again, if you have a very large estate, because none of it goes to probate. I also mentioned joint tenancies. So after my mom passed away, each of us learned that my mom had created joint tenancies on 3 different investment accounts that had equal amounts of money in it. So those went automatically to her children. No fighting, no nothing. That simple. We learned about it later. It was all in a safe deposit box. So you can add another person on title as a joint owner with the effect that they become the sole owner upon your passing. But keep in mind, you're giving that person co-ownership of the property now. So if you say to somebody, okay, here's all the paperwork where you are now co-owner of all of my investment accounts, well, keep in mind that maybe you don't want to do that with certain people, because you might find that, like King Lear, he gave away his money too soon, and then he had nothing, or the money was dissipated. Again, I can't tell you what to do. I can only tell you what to think about, what questions to ask. And in all of this, think about what you want to accomplish by your bequests and your requests. Because some of the things you don't control. You can't control everything after you leave the body, nor should you be trying. You're somewhere else now. So do you want to help a religious institution or some other charity? Are there people who depend on your support, financial? Are there people who depend on you for emotional support that you can perhaps help through financial means? What needs do your children have, if any, and how can you meet them? Are there personal items that may not have economic value that you want people to have? And by the way, I remember going to an estate sale in my neighborhood, and this woman had lived in this home for 50 years. Whoever had a control of her property just simply opened it up to the public, and people walked through and saw the most personal pictures, the most personal notebooks, the most personal writing, strangers who happen to be walking through. Is that what you want? If so, fine, but if you want something different, make arrangements for it now. So if you don't take the time to put your wishes in writing, you could have problems during your lifetime with medical care and your property. This is a summation. You could leave behind arguments. Your wishes might not be followed. The persons whom you love could be hurt. Your transition out of the body, where you're supposed to be focused on God and getting closer to God, could be distracted by people who are trying to get to you for the wrong reasons. These are the kinds of things that a person leaving the body should not be thinking about, nor are they things to leave behind. So, look, death is only a change of garment, a change of condition, right? So make the practical and legal arrangements you need to make now so you can stop clinging to the body and focus on what's really immortal. So I'll be available to answer questions now or later. That's the gist of what I wanted to say. Thank you, Swami. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. We do have questions, and let me just take a little time here. If you'd like to ask questions, if you go to your participants button below, you'll see it opens up a box on your right-hand side. It says raise hand. Click on raise hand, and then we can call on you. And if you've raised your hand for the previous session but don't want to ask a question this session, please unraise your hand so your hand will be deleted. Anthony, let me start it off here there's a question that came in. Well, first of all, how often should we update once we have an estate planned out or a will planned out? is it necessary to go back over it just because maybe things change? How often should we go over this?
Not too often, and I'll tell you why. What I've noticed is that people who are constantly updating their estate plan are more susceptible to being manipulated. It's like, oh, blah, blah, blah is irritated with her church because of a slight or a friend. So now all of a sudden they're cut out and someone else is added in. So if you do it, don't do it too publicly, and do it only if you feel that something significant has changed. And if you're constantly updating the estate plan, then you're focusing so much on your worldly possessions, it sort of defeats the whole purpose, which is to shed yourself. So only you know how often it should be, but I wouldn't do it too often. And I've seen lots of issues arise when people are constantly changing. I think just a consistent, thoughtful plan, and then mentally check in on it every 6 months or a year, depending on what's going on, to decide whether you want to make slight changes is the best way to do it.
Thank you, Anthony. Vikram, let's go to our first live question.
The first live question is from Vijay. Vijay, where are you joining us from? Vijay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, you're up, sir.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm in the Houston, Texas area.
Lovely.
Wonderful. Fantastic presentation. I actually myself have given similar ones. I'm not an attorney, but I'm a financial advisor. And a couple of points I wanted to make was on life insurance policies, many people have as their contingent beneficiaries their minor children. And this is where that trust that Anthony talked about can absolutely play a role, because I don't know how things work in California, but in the state of Texas, the insurance company will not let the assets go to the children unless there is some explicit instructions given. And then other couple of points were about beneficiary designations. A lot of people are very cavalier about not checking who the beneficiary designations are. And then on bank accounts, something called the POD, something that everybody can do, the payable on death. And then the updating of the trust that you talked about, and especially I know a lot of people that have properties in many different states. I think the trust is absolutely essential in those situations, because simple will probably not do it. And then a question I had for you was, you mentioned about making of the video. If a video is prepared with instructions on what should happen to your possessions after death instead of before, is that just as valid?
No, it can help to substitute, but it's a state, how do I say this? There's something called a holographic will. They're much more difficult to prove. They're much less accepted. Usually that's something that's written out and not witnessed. But some courts accept videos as a holographic will, but it's not the best way to do it. I was emphasizing video in terms of showing that you were of sound mind when giving gifts pre-death. And what I said was, if for some reason you don't make a will, at minimum make a video, but it's not a good substitute. Not at all. And I appreciate what you said about beneficiary designations and the like. And very importantly, if you have children, for example, let's say you have one child and you make your child the beneficiary of your life insurance policy. Well, let's say that child, the child has another parent, and perhaps you don't think that other parent is going to be particularly responsible. Guess what? That parent will control the disposition or how that money is spent. Supposed to be doing it with the child's best interest in mind, but you may not agree. So perhaps what you should do is create that trust and appoint a trustee if you want the child taken care of properly and as you see fit. So thank you for bringing that up.
Can people do their own trust? I know that kind of gets very complicated. It's better to use a lawyer, right?
It sure is. For a trust, absolutely. And I'm not looking for work. There are lawyers who do this, who can do it inexpensively, who specialize in it, who can spot the issues immediately and have templates for it. So you really should. It's worth the money even if you don't think your estate is all that large.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. Vikram, let's get to our next live question.
The next live question could be for Swami, yes, but let me just confirm. The basis, I think you're up, sir. Devashish? He may not be there, Swamiji.
Okay, that's fine. Anthony, a question came up from Dave, who asked, what is the advantage of estate plan over a will?
Well, an estate plan, see, a will is part of an estate plan. So what I've been talking about is estate planning. So, so there is no advantage. Estate plan is the broad rubric, and under that broad rubric, will or a trust with a pour over will, or a totem trust, or a special needs trust. There are all sorts of complicated vehicles, but they're all under the overall heading of estate plan.
Thank you. Another question is from Ms. Kale. Please tell what is the amount after which you need to pay probate taxes?
Okay. Well, first of all, it depends on state by state, but this is where it gets a little tricky because it changes over time. And it also has to do with whether we're talking about federal or state taxes. I think federal at this point, but I think, don't take this to the bank, get a lawyer, because this is the danger of a non-specialist answering a specialized question. I think it's 5 million now. But don't think of it in terms of, okay, I'm worth 7 million and this lawyer from California just said 5 million, I better go out and create a trust. Because some of that property might be held in joint tenancy, therefore it's not part of the estate. Let's say you own, of your hypothetical 7 million, you own 5 million in real estate and it automatically goes to a co-owner on your death. Now your estate is only 2 million. So again, it's fact specific.
Thank you, Anthony. There's a question by HP, Vikram. So before we get to that person, let me give another question here. What happens to digital property like email accounts or digital currency?
Well, okay, digital currency, of course, is an asset, and you need to call it out on these lists that I'm talking about. If you own Bitcoin or whatever, let people know where it is, let them know how to get to it, leave a list of all your codes behind. I've dealt with situations where forensic people have had to be hired to go in and figure out how to find the assets. What a mess. Digital accounts, they're not considered property, at least not in California. But as a practical matter, accessing those accounts can be important, or perhaps you don't want those accounts accessed. Perhaps you don't want an executor doing that. And that's really interesting because I was appointed artistic executor by a famous musician who passed away. And I had to go in and figure out what to do with all of his unwritten songs. And then this is sort of a related thing. It's a form of intellectual property. That's an asset as well. So I figured it out because I helped draft the will. And anyway, leave it at that. But these are all very nebulous things. So getting back to the question, Bitcoin or digital currency is an asset. If you just simply have beneficiaries without specific designations of who gets it, they'll get it prorated if that's how you've done it. And internet addresses and the like, that's simply a way of getting to your information. It's not an asset in and of itself. To get back to the question.
Thank you, Anthony. Oh, there she is. Big screen. So now we are going to be talking about death from a medical perspective. Today we have Dr. Sheila Patel, who's the Chief Medical Officer for Chopra Global. She is trained in both Western medicine and also Ayurvedic medicine. She's a family physician, and she is an incredible doctor. She does presentations at the Chopra Center. She is one who knows both medicine and spirituality and does a great job blending the two together. And we're so fortunate to have her. She's like a goddess in the Chopra Center. She speaks in front of thousands and thousands of people, and we are really just happy. She's also a devotee. Her and her father have been coming here to our San Diego Center for now a few years, and we're just so really happy to have them. She's given presentations at the Vedanta Center, and she's really an extraordinary person. So we're really fortunate to have her, and she's going to be speaking to us a little bit now about the medical perspective on that. Dr. Sheila Patel. Thank you, Dr. Sheila Patel.
Thank you, Swami. You can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you okay.
Well, thank you for that introduction. It's really my honor to be here. So thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this. And also thank you to Swami and Anthony for your amazing presentations. So many important things to think about, and from these amazing perspectives. You know, and as Swami mentioned, I, you know, sort of halfway through my career, although again, especially with life-saving treatments, Western medicine is very useful, identified you know, some of the limitations. So started learning about Ayurveda, which now I focus more on, you know, trying to stay well and prevent disease. But early on in my career as a family physician, for 15 years, I really practiced the whole spectrum of medicine and in smaller communities. So I was really there at the moment of birth. So I was doing deliveries, as well as many people transitioning, you know, at that moment of death. And saw so many people through this process, families, you know, and a journey through terminal illness at times, because, you know, as we've alluded to, death can show up in many different ways. It can be a trauma, very quick, which has its own set of unique situations, and then also a terminal illness, which, you know, people are on a little bit of a longer journey with this idea of mortality. But I've witnessed, you know, many different situations, and they're all unique and very important. Again, looking at these perspectives, I was thinking about property, and as we were talking about planning for property, which, you know, what happens to it, so important, because that does, I love what Anthony said about preparing so that you're not distracted, you know, at the most important times. And also thinking of preparation as an act of love. It really is, for your family, for yourself, for this piece of property, this body that we're temporarily inhabiting, that we're, you know, our bodies, this physical body, you know, this body made of matter, is really on loan from the environment, right? And it's our job to take care of it, and even think about and be, you know, be conscious choice makers of how we care for this body, even, you know, during the moments of death. So, you know, it's always best to be a conscious choice maker. Otherwise, you know, things happen. And you know, I'm not by any means an expert in spirituality, so I wouldn't, you know, we don't know what happens, like when these things are happening beyond our conscious choice making, but you know, more than likely it's leaving these karmic imprints. So we want to free ourselves of the, you know, karma, leave some behind, be able to pass and transition in the most peace that we can, and for our families. So it's very important. I'm going to just spend a little bit of time. Thank you to Anthony for talking about some of the medical documents, because I was going to mention those, but I'll give you a little bit of my perspective on those documents, and then I'll spend some time talking about, like, you know, the death and dying process in the physical body, because that's really what we deal with in medicine, as we know, is really this physical body. And even in Ayurveda, a lot of the tools are to take care of this matter and this physical body that our soul is traveling in. And also, you know, talk about pain, because I noticed there were several questions that had come in. That seems to be something that we're, you know, obviously concerned about, you know, during and right before that time of death. But first, let me just say, filling out these documents is actually very important. For so many years, and I still continue to see patients, you know, we give people these documents. You can get some of the documents, you know, from your doctor's office, like the DNR, do not resuscitate forms. There's some advanced directives that, you know, you fill out what you would like to do or not do. And then there's one here in California called PULST, Physician Order for Life-Sustaining Treatments. So there are many different forms, and again, legally, it's different in potentially in each state and also in different countries. So I'm going to give you kind of my perspective here in the U.S., having worked in different states and also in California. But I think as much as you can prepare and that your legal system provides to you, to have these forms filled out is so important. And I know it's difficult to talk about, and I've had these conversations with patients starting fairly young. A 40 or 50-year-old may be saying, well, why do I need to think about this? But we never know when that moment is coming. And if we can prepare so that we can direct what happens to the body, then I think that's always best. But I know over my career, I've given the papers out quite a bit and not that many come back. So I'll plug here while I have your ears that please fill out the forms. It makes it easier for everyone involved, not just for you and how your body's treated, but as Anthony mentioned, for family members. I've seen lots of drama, and when people even in the family have differing ideas about whether to continue life-sustaining treatments, whether not to, even again in the case of terminal illnesses such as cancer, Jillian will be addressing things from like that hospice perspective, but even starting to think about what you would want to do in that situation. Do you want to pursue a lot of medical treatments or focus on palliative care, staying comfortable for the life that you have left? And these, again, are conversations to have with your family members, your children, your spouses, so that they're aware of how you feel. And I would also add here that try, if you're on the receiving end of a parent or somebody talking to you about how they want to deal with their life and their illness, to not judge and not try to control it too much. Certainly you want to have conversation and you can ask questions. Well, why are you saying that? Why wouldn't you want to do that? Or why do you want to do that? And ask questions, but really they're ultimately, allow them to make the decision for themselves. I've seen this is why I bring it up, that a parent will come in with a child who's really trying to control their situation, and it really doesn't necessarily create a sense of peace for the person that's going through it. So, and I'll say this too, also from the perspective of seeing a lot of patients that want to do things with alternative therapies, or maybe they do want to pursue the full Western medical treatment. Again, without trying to push kind of your agenda onto your family members, you can ask questions, tell them, well, these are other things I've heard about, these are options, and then ultimately, again, let them be their own choice maker. So I'll just add that again, just because I see these issues come up over and over and over when it comes to healthcare in families. And again, the other reason it's very important to have these things written down is because oftentimes, something can happen, and as Anthony mentioned, legally, definitely here, if there, and most of the time, say if you faint or something happens in a situation where you're not right by your file cabinet where your DNR papers are, and you don't have a bracelet or something that says DNR, meaning do not resuscitate, then by law, if 911 is called, they're required to keep that body alive until they get you to the hospital. And then even at the hospital, we're required, if not told otherwise, to, again, put tubes down to keep the body breathing, to do a certain amount of resuscitation, and until we hear otherwise, or until, again, there are limits, and I'll talk about that, to when we say, this body is gone and can no longer, what we're doing is not keeping the body alive. But up until then, we're required to do that. So if you feel very strongly that you do not want, and I'm just going to, again, spend a little bit of time talking about the differences between some of these things, because I find this is the challenge sometimes when people are filling out this paperwork. They don't really understand what are all these differences. So do not resuscitate, and that can be part of a more lengthy advanced directive, is basically saying, I don't want you to do chest compressions, when we're doing CPR, and I do not want you to put down a tube and help me breathe if I am, if those functions are not happening naturally for me. So if I'm found down and I have a DNR bracelet, or sometimes you can get a necklace, and if you're in a public place, they're going to call 911, right? If you're in your home, and you have a terminal illness and your family knows you do not want to be resuscitated, well, 911 won't be part of the process. They'll know not to call. But if you're in a public situation, somebody's going to call 911. If they don't see one of those things, they'll do, the compressions and potentially, keep some breathing going on, whether you watch TV, right, with the bags and things. And sometimes they'll put in these temporary tubes. So if you feel like, I'm at that stage in my life, if something happens and I'm not breathing and my heart has stopped and I'm at peace, please leave me alone, then it is actually important to have these bracelets and things like that. So DNR really just refers to those things, chest compression, like immediate life-saving procedures. So let's say somebody falls and is unconscious, but they are breathing and their heart is, they do have a pulse. 911 will come, maybe give some minimal support with a little bit of oxygen and take them to the hospital. Then there are other decisions that may need to be made that, again, if the hospital has on file, as Anthony mentioned, if you're in your local environment and there's a certain hospital that you would go to, it's nice to give it to them. They'll have it in their record, or your primary physician, who could then be called to send it. Now we can do things electronically to the hospital, or a family member could be called and and say what are the person's wishes. So then there's a little bit of more detail to give. Do you want to be given IV fluids, and for how long? Do you want to be given artificial nutrition? So this can happen, say, if somebody's in a coma situation where they're breathing, their heart is beating, but they're not, they don't have that awareness, they're not awake consciously. Again, there's awareness internally, as Swami mentioned, but their muscles aren't moving, they're not responding, to you. So that person really isn't able to eat. So then these questions come up. Do you want to have artificial nutrition? And for a short period of time, sometimes people can do that through IVs to see what's going to happen in the next week or so. Is this person going to, is that consciousness and awareness going to, arise again or not? And so sometimes you can temporarily do nutrition through IVs. So maybe that's something you write, temporary IV nutrition, okay, but I do not want, then there's something called like a tube that you would put into the intestines to actually give food. And in that situation, the body can be kept alive for quite a long time because you're actually feeding the body food, because you can't keep the IVs in for too long. So that's sometimes a distinction many people will make. IV nutrition would be okay because maybe in a couple-week period, I'm actually, going to come back, but do not put in a G tube, or do not, give me, and again, a doctor or somebody could help you with this languaging, but these are very important distinctions to make. And I say this again as a medical provider and also from personal experience. My father-in-law was one of those people who said, do never, ever don't put a tube in me to feed. If my body can't feed itself, I want to go. And he actually had a stroke and was in that situation. And so having those conversations, the entire family knew very strongly that he did not want that. And so we had to tell the medical providers, because they are always going to err and say, hey, we think we should do this. They're going to want to be aggressive and keep the body alive. That's their job, as we mentioned. And so again, if those conversations weren't there, one sibling may feel like, of course we should do that. And another one might say, well, I don't think Dad would want us to do that. And then there can be real issues. So just be aware, and these are conversations to have with your medical provider. What are all of those little details that might really help to, when the time comes, because sometimes we just think about CPR and resuscitation, but there are these other things to consider as well. So that's important. And then again, organ and tissue donation. We talked about, and again, these are all very personal choices. There's really no right or wrong, but I think, thinking about what you would like is important, and then documenting that. And as Anthony said, these things can be changed. So sometimes people are afraid to fill out the forms because they think, well, what if I change my mind? Or, and certainly these things can be changed. So, and then you would want to, if you did that, give the new documents to whoever needed them. So, so those are just kind of, again, not things we necessarily love talking about, but I think, part of our spiritual practice too is the realization that, I think as Swami said in the beginning, we realize everybody dies, but we don't like to think about our own death, or we don't think it's going to happen to us anytime soon. And hope, maybe it will be a long time, maybe it won't, but the more we can, meditate and have the spiritual inquiry and understand this temporary sort of existence that is, this span between birth and death, then it starts to become more comfortable to have the conversations. And I definitely find my mother was very, very spiritual, and she passed through a more prolonged illness with cancer, in which we did use hospice because she tried, just again, my personal experience, several rounds of chemotherapy, and she was uncomfortable and it wasn't working, and she made a decision she wanted to stop. There was the opportunity to continue, and we had a family discussion, and being very spiritual, she said, I just want to, I trust sometimes that there's an intuition. I think as Swami had said, we have these intuitions, premonitions, whatever you want to call it, that the soul knows. And so she decided to stop, and lived for another 4 months very comfortably, no pain, no anything. And so, again, these are difficult conversations, but necessary. And I think the stronger our spiritual practices, the more comfortable, we are with these conversations. So, if you have questions about some of those forms or distinctions, I can definitely take questions after this and then at the end. But again, I would just encourage you to sit down with either a healthcare provider, your lawyer, or somebody to help you really fill out the detail. And the more detail, the better, again. There is a website I wanted to give you, and Jillian, I'm sure, is aware of this. It's nhpco.org, National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, nhpco.org. And you can go by state. So you can put in your state, and it'll basically print out like all of the forms and tell you what needs to be done in your state as far as medical, directives. So that's one resource for you to find forms. But and again, they can be confusing. So I encourage you to talk to your doctor about what does this mean? And, that's very helpful. I've had lots of those conversations with people. So now I'll just switch a bit to the kind of physical process of dying. Swami gave a beautiful lecture on, and I'm always so fascinated to see this, how the Vedic, Vedanta and the Vedic philosophy and in part of Ayurveda describes this life, and life force, and it is so tied to prana and the breath, right? It's one of the things, again, if someone's not breathing and we put in a tube and help them breathe, we are circulating that prana, and that's what keeps movement and keeps life in all of those cells. And that's why we can do that. We, in the medical environment, if you're talking purely from a physical lens, we say it's oxygen and it's keeping oxygen in the body, which it is. But there's also this spiritual, this life force, this prana that we're circulating through the breath. And that's, again, the power of prana. And when we do our pranayam, we're circulating this prana. But yeah, and then just even like, again, describing successively how each of these pranas, sort of withdraws. These are the things we see in the physical body then manifesting. Sometimes, again, there can be movement in the body. And again, I'm talking about kind of, close to the time of death. There can be groans and moans, as these different pranas are being released. So sometimes I'll reassure families, like sitting there in hospitals, they'll be making sounds, and they will always say, are they having pain? Are they having pain? And although sometimes it's difficult to tell, we do have some things that we look at in the, like we're looking, are they wincing? Are they grimacing? Is it just, do they look comfortable, but there's just sounds coming and they're moaning? then we tell people, this is part of the dying process, and it's okay. They are comfortable. And so sometimes people just need that reassurance. Obviously, nobody wants their loved one or themselves, to be in pain. And again, a lot of the questions revolved around that, because that is something we're concerned about during those times. But again, during those moments, some of those things aren't necessarily due to pain. And ultimately, again, what happens is when the breath stops. So let's talk about in a situation where we're not keeping somebody, artificially ventilated. When the breath stops, that again is those pranas kind of leaving the body. But from a physical perspective, because we're not circulating oxygen, and movement then stops in the body as well. And so then there's like an acidic environment that, starts to develop in the body. And a lot of the processes that are supported by oxygen, like keeping electrolytes normal and, even in the cells, progressively each of the organs, stops working. Again, we're talking about the physical body, the liver, the kidneys, the heart, the brain. And then the cells then in that acidic environment start to break up and die. So the physical actual cells die. That's a process, again, called autolysis, or, the cell is breaking down. And again, as soon as we stop breathing, if someone's found down, we usually within a 5 to 10 minute period, this process starts. So especially in the brain, we can have some cell death, and depending on the parts of the brain where this happens. And again, I ultimately feel a lot of this is karma, right? And karma, like where certain areas of the body are, being affected most. But sometimes certain parts of the brain where we have awareness start to die, those cells. So that's why somebody can maybe not have awareness, but the brainstem and the part of the brain that controls respiration and breathing is still functioning. So they can still be breathing even though they're not aware. It really just has to do with which parts of the brain the cell death happens. But within a 5 to 10 minute period, especially in certain parts of the body, like the brain, this cell death starts happening. And again, this is it's dependent on temperature. So we've heard stories, right, when people are submerged in frozen water, because that's slowing down that process of the cell death. Everything is slower, when it's cold, right? Heat is movement, and when it's cold, it slows down. So people can be submerged for much longer than that 5 or 10 minutes and still, and we have processes in the medical environment. Sometimes we keep people cold while we're resuscitating them. And then slowly heat up the body to see what happens, and they can be, revived. But in, under normal temperatures, this is what happens when there's no, when there's not oxygen being circulated. And then, also the heart muscle can have damage. So then ultimately sometimes the heart muscle can't keep beating. So obviously these are two very vital organs that if their functions stop, then the physical body really can't continue. And then again, then these processes of how the mind and the soul let go of the body start to occur. So again, this process of death really depends on which parts of the body are affected. So certainly much quicker if it's brain and heart. Sometimes it can be more of a prolonged illness because the kidneys, maybe there's damage, but they're still kind of working, the liver, et cetera. But these vital organs need to be functioning for us to be alive. And that's why sometimes, again, with resuscitation, so when we're resuscitating people, we do call it, or we make a decision to stop at a certain period of time if their oxygen level isn't coming up, or we haven't seen the heart show a beat of its own in some period of time. And usually that's around 20 minutes or so, because by that time it's presumed there's so much cell death that that body cannot be, revived. So again, all of these things is very individual, and ultimately we don't know. And doctors will tell you we really have a hard time predicting sometimes because we don't know and this is my spiritual perspective, and people have different religious and spiritual beliefs, but we don't know the karma of that person. And so sometimes you do everything that you do to try to support if there's something left in the physical body, and that person still passes, and you do the exact same thing to another person, and they're revived. And so again, we've heard many stories of people in comas, and people even again getting treatments for cancers and other things. It's no two people will be the same. So I'll just say that it's but the physical process of dying has to do with like this cell death and which organs it's happening in. When it comes to pain, again, ultimately, and I've watched many people pass, and we know so pain, there's three components to pain. There's some sort of sensation, right? So there's a physical, either it's like you get poked with a pin, or you have a broken bone, or something internally is creating a sensation. Then there's the perception. So the brain perceives this physical sensation, and there's a perception of pain. So pain is a very interesting topic, and really we're learning more and more that pain is really a perception. Yes, there has to be some sort of physical sensation, but a lot of it has to do with the brain and how it perceives that pain. And then the third part is the emotional reaction to that perception. So this has to go, this goes very much into like how our mind is prepared in every moment for, every situation, but, definitely pain. And so the person's mood, we could say potentially the guna, in their mind, what's predominant in their mind is also going to control that perception of pain. So these are really the main three components. There's a physical sensation, there's the perception in the brain, and then there's kind of the emotional reaction to that. And there's some very interesting studies, and this is why, even though I teach meditation and yoga and pranayama and, to kind of lay people and really we talk about it in the sense of like staying well. But really, in essence, you can think about all of your spiritual practices as actually also preparing you for death, in the most peaceful way that you can. When you do your self-care, you take care of your body, then even that moment of passing is more calm. If you can generate calm in the mind, calm in the body. And so there's some very interesting studies done. One of the questions I had seen was about how to modulate pain besides pain medication, right? Because yes, you can use pain medication, but there's other ways to modulate pain. A regular meditation practice can do that. There's some really interesting studies on monks where they took monks who, of course, had meditated for, many years, and then a normal population. And all of them received a little electrical shock. These consenting adults, they consented to this study, and they all rated what was the intensity of that pain, just as a sensation, as a physical sensation. And a lot of people would say 8, 9, 7, even the monks, they're like, this physical sensation is intense. It's a 7, 8, or 9, or 10. Then when they asked, how uncomfortable were you with that sensation? The monks, 0, 1, 0, 1. Like, I felt the sensation, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Normally, people who, weren't regular meditators, 7, 8, 9, it matched. This was very uncomfortable. And so subsequently, over the decades, they've done lots of brain research. And again, what they found is when we can cultivate these higher areas of the brain, the more evolved parts of the brain, that correlate with higher levels of our consciousness and awareness, then our perception of a physical sensation can be very different. If we're stuck in stress mode all the time, that part of our brain, the physical sensations are going through parts of the brain, and when we're really stressed, we will feel the discomfort more. And again, there are many, many studies on stress, and that pain can be more. So I would say for people that are, concerned, certainly there are things we can do at the moment of death, but even now, like, really having a regular spiritual practice, keeping that prana with your pranayam, keeping your body as healthy as you can with healthy food and yoga, like that all plays a role. And then in the moment, again, recognize the physical body can have pain. It's a mental experience. The soul is always free of pain. So you don't have to worry about that with your loved one, right? The qualities of experience are always in the world, in the mind, in the body. Our soul is always free of that. But again, when we're still attached to the body and our thoughts and our mind, we have that experience of pain. So there definitely, I would not hesitate to use pain medication as needed. Some people hesitate, like, I don't want to, make them so sleepy they're not aware. And there are ways we can fine tune that. So, I wouldn't be too afraid of that. Sometimes just making someone just comfortable enough that they're not grimacing and they're not painful, then they can actually relax and be in a more calm state as they transition. So I wouldn't be afraid of using pain medication, but there are many other things you can do. There have been studies of people in hospitals that, if people can just sit with them and do some slow breathing, like teaching them to just breathe slowly, breathe in for 5 seconds and breathe out for 5 seconds, something simple like that. Do massage on them, with some good healthy organic oils. Like that helps to calm the nerves and calm the nervous system down. And when the nervous system is calmed down, again, instead of the stress parts of our brain, we go into these higher parts of the brain and we feel less pain. So these are things like people can feel empowered to help their loved ones, by just doing a little bit of massage or, help breathing with them, creating a sense of peace, in the room with them. So these are other things that, like if someone has a regular meditation or devotional practice and they're lighting incense, our brain has this neuroassociative ability. So senses are very tightly linked to the mind. So if there's a certain type of incense that they're always using during devotional practice, or even a chant or some music. It could be music. It doesn't even have to be a chant. It could be some beautiful music that they've always loved. When you play that for them or you light that incense, it creates this neuroassociative conditioning that takes them to a place of peace and calm, because you're associating that smell or that song with peace and calm. And so, use these things. Those are things you can use during those challenging times, because it does help. It will help your loved one. And again, just be aware that, although again, and Jillian will talk about kind of the hospice process more from the emotional standpoint, but I'll say from the physical, medical perspective. It's helpful to, again, have these trained professionals coming in and helping you if your loved one has chosen to, has an illness and they're not pursuing treatment, to pass at home in their comfortable environment, family around, that small doses of medication just to kind of calm the body if, other things aren't working can be okay. I think I've seen a lot of families, they're always like, are you sure that's not too much? Or I don't want to, snow them, so that, they can't hear me. They'll still hear, they can hear you, they can, those senses are still there, they can feel you. And again, there is a progressive withdrawing of senses, but, sound is the last one, right? It's the first one that's created and subsequently the last one to go. So in whatever level of awareness or comas or otherwise, I always tell people, talk to your loved one. Music is very helpful. Love to see, Anthony's guitars. Obviously, he's a music lover. Music is so powerful. Chanting, sometimes, as my mom was sleeping or passing, we were playing some chants, in the room. And so even if they're not responding, be aware that there's still awareness there, right? If the body is there, there's some awareness there. And so these are the tools of the senses that you can use to, make it more peaceful. So I will stop there. I think those were the main points that I wanted to bring up, and just see if there's questions. If not, I can keep talking, but let's see if there are any questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Patel. So if you'd like to ask a question, please just raise your hand or go to the participants box and raise your hand there. One question came up, Dr. Patel, was that you've seen a number of people in their stage of passing away. And there are some probably you've seen that when they pass away, it seems like the transition is much more difficult for them. Whereas with others, it may be more serene and more peaceful, more welcoming. Is there, from your experience of seeing the patients, what state of mind do the patients that you see that want to can't let go or have a rough time letting go, what is the best state of mind that we should have as we're transitioning sort of out?
Yeah, again, I think this is where how we live our life can be how we die as well, and so I'm a very strong proponent of our daily practices, because we're cultivating a mind, we're cultivating a body that really is preparing for that time. So I do find people, I've had so many conversations with people, they know they're passing, and they know, in the days before or what have you. And sometimes people will say to me and have said to me, "Thank you so much for everything you've done. This is the last time I'm going to see you." And I'm like, "How do you know that?" This was early in my career. And then the next morning I would come in and find out they were gone. But I've always been impressed with the people who just have a very, and again, it doesn't have to necessarily do with religion per se, but a very spiritual faith and a spiritual strength that whatever they believe is going to happen after they pass, it gives them peace, and that for sure keeps people from wanting to grasp, and stay, in the world. I've definitely seen people who are, and no judgment, but people are at various levels of awareness, and some people are still very worldly, and they're like, do everything you can, to stay alive, because there are either emotional residuals, like relationships that there was no closure on, or they don't want to let go of this body or this life or this world or their home or whatever it is. They do struggle more, and so I think, and I find in those situations, if they haven't planned ahead and prepared, then there's family struggle, and it's just, now I know how to explain it when I walk into a room when there's a person who's, not comfortable with the whole process of dying. There's family turbulence. You just walk in the room and you can feel it. Other people and saintly people, you see, there's a sense, and it's an energy that you're, it's that sort of field that you're creating around you, that there's just a sense of peace for them. So I do think a spiritual practice, and again, there may be people who are atheists or whoever but they have some strength of faith of what they think is going to happen, and maybe they think the body's just gone, and that's okay with me. They seem to have a more sense of, calm and peace. Now, again, I will say some of this can depend, and I believe this is karmic, that certain types of illnesses can create a little bit more discomfort for people. If there's a certain part of the body that's not getting enough circulation, or has had some trauma, or various reasons. Breathing, sometimes if someone has lung issues, they can have labored breathing that maybe gives them a little more discomfort. But this is where, again, we can help by sometimes even just using minimal tools. But still, the people who have the strong kind of spiritual or some sort of faith, it doesn't take as much to keep them calm during the process. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
And I'll say, people who, and this is, part of our work in our life, is like those strong relationships, strong personal relationships. You have people around you, love in your life, even if it's one person, or, but you know, if you're not holding on to resentment against people, like that mind, how clear your mind is and how much love you've cultivated, helps as well. And then, you know, as Swami mentioned, like, again, in a spiritual context, you know, if you've cultivated this focused mind, that you, in those moments, you can focus on God or your, you know, mantra or whatever. In those moments, you have that focused mind. You do better regardless of kind of what condition is going on in the body.
Thank you. And now I'd like to go into our next speaker, which is Miss Jillian Renault. Jillian Renault is an interfaith hospice chaplain with Vitas Healthcare, and she resides in LA. She provides emotional and spiritual support to patients, especially at the end of their lives, and to families and after the loss of their loved ones. I think it's important for her to speak, to really talk about how to deal with loss and grieving, how to open us up so we can have the conversations, especially in Indian families. I've found, coming from an Indian family myself, and knowing other Indian families, it is difficult to have conversations with your parents. The parents have difficulty having conversations with their kids. We have coming from different cultures. In fact, I asked the families, many of the families, have your kids come to this talk now so they know what to do and how to prepare for your own deaths. But how many kids have actually come? This is she's really an important bridge to help us. Please listen to what she has to say, because she's going to help us to be able to open ourselves up to the needs of our parents and also the needs of our children, and how to create a dialogue without letting your ego get in the way. I think this is important conversations. We as an Indian generation need to learn how to do this. It's much more easier in a Western family from my perception. But so I'd like to invite Miss Jillian Renault. Jillian, are you there? I can't see you.
I am. I'm here, right. and I'm unmuted.
And
Okay.
also, she's a devotee in our Ramakrishna Trabuco Monastery. And so she's just such a lovely person, and it's going to be quite a delight to listen to you. Thank you, Jillian. Please go on.
Okay, so thank you, Swami, and I also want to thank everybody for their great presentations. And I also want to give a deep bow of gratitude to Vedanta itself. I started Vedanta when studying Vedanta in 2004, and it's because of the Vedanta teachings that I went back to school in my early 60s, left my career in business, and became a hospice chaplain. So the karma yoga path called to me very deeply in a spiritual way. And I can't, it brings me to tears every time I think about it. Thanks to Swami Yogeshananda and the many other Swamis and teachings, it really changed my life and brought me to where I am today. I also wanted to add briefly to what Anthony said. There is also a document called 5 Wishes. You can find it at 5wishes.org. It does not replace an advance directive. But what it does, it goes more in depth on an emotional and spiritual level. So for instance, it will ask you, so it's a series of questions that you fill in. And for instance, it will say, would you like someone to pray at your bedside? And if so, who? Was there particular music? Dr. Patel mentioned that. Is there particular music that you would like? And it asks these very, what we think of as kind of soft questions, not having to do with legal or medical issues, that can be so important for people, especially when they're no longer able to speak. Even if they have dementia, like Swami and Dr. Patel have talked about, there is enough awareness there that having somebody say certain prayers at their bedside, and the person whose voice is most comforting, can mean a huge amount, and they can say that ahead of time. So you can find it at 5wishes.org. I'd also like to emphasize that hospice is a program, not a place. People sometimes think that it is a hospice center. There are a few here in the States, I think the same in Canada and the UK, excuse me, but they are few and far between. And it is a program. People come onto hospice when the doctor, the physician, prescribes it, feeling that the patient has 6 months or less to live. That is not set in stone. So some people might be on our service much longer than that, but always with the sense that they have chosen to not get any more curative treatment and that they have a terminal condition. Hospice has an interdisciplinary team that involves a doctor, a nurse, a social worker, a chaplain, and a home health aide. The doctor and the nurse are required to visit through Medicare. The social worker, the chaplain, and the aide are services that a family may choose or not, depending. We have many families who are culturally Jewish, probably non-observant, may have gone through the Holocaust. And to them, the thought of someone with even a slight spiritual bias being at their bedside is something they do not want to deal with. I do see some of those families coming to them from a more emotional point of view, but oftentimes there are just some people who don't want a spiritual person around. So let's go to the first slide. Do we have the slide up, Vikram? Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's go to the next one. Next slide. So I'm going to go just briefly over the types of grief, a couple of theories of grief. There are many, many theories. Researchers and scholars have looked at grief from all different angles. Our organizers had wanted a little information about children. How do children deal with grief? And then I'm going to talk about how we move through grief and moving forward in life. There's more than I can say really in half an hour for all of us, but that's what I'm going to touch on today. So next slide. Grief, I think, is grossly misunderstood. It is a natural human response to loss. And what I believe it calls for is courage. It really takes courage to look at grief and to work your way through it. It takes time. It takes intentionality. And by that, I mean being intentional about how you mourn. Grief is the experience of what you feel when you lose someone. Mourning is what you do about it, how you manifest it in the world. And I'm also going to talk briefly about the kind of support, everything from friends and family to possibly professional help. Next. So anticipatory grief. I often think this is what Arjuna must have felt when he was standing in the middle of the battlefield, looking at this army of people, relatives that he was destined as a warrior to go into battle with. Anticipating the grief of losing these people. Krishna taught him many lessons that took him beyond that, but that's often my first thought of Arjuna. So anticipatory grief, as it says, it's a natural process that happens prior to death, both for the patient and for the family. It may include deepening or questioning of religious beliefs. Sometimes people who have turned to a particular belief in adulthood might revert back to the belief that they started as children. That often happens. And when somebody acknowledges and goes through anticipatory grief, it may ease the severity of grief after someone has died. So we know, as the doctor said, that there can be different kinds of illnesses. There are long-term diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, devastating for both family and patient. But those can last 5-10 years or longer, which gives a family and patient a long time to get used to the idea that this is a terminal illness. So they have lots of time to go through this anticipatory grief. A cancer like a pancreatic cancer that is often diagnosed very late, someone may only have a few months, a little less time to have this type of grief. And then there's the sudden deaths from a car accident or a heart attack, when people have no time, which can be really devastating. And the thing that they may go through for a long time is just shock and disbelief. For the patient and for the loved one too, denial, hope, bargaining, anger, guilt, all of these things come up during this time in different ways, some more than others, depending on the family. And to Anthony's point, the patient will often feel an urgency to put their affairs in order. The questioner, Mahua, just now said her father did feel that, unfortunately, a little too late for him to really take care of it. But this does often come up for a patient. Something that's often sad for the family is that it is a natural thing for the patient to withdraw from the family emotionally, because they are going through both a physical change that's all-encompassing and a spiritual change, as Swami has talked about. They often don't want to have as much emotional contact with the family, which sometimes is confusing for the family, but a very natural process. For loved ones, very similar things. Families can bond closer together. They can also fracture. You know, one person says, yes, we need to do every clinical trial possible. The other person says, you know, Dad said very clearly he doesn't want extraordinary measures, we should let him go. So again, important for families to talk about this ahead of time and know exactly what the patient wants. When you're going through anticipatory grief, loss of appetite, irritability, fatigue, insomnia, all of these things are very close to the surface. You maybe feel like a sort of raw nerve in a way, very natural. Indecision, guilt, mood changes. Let's go to the next slide. So one of the questions that came ahead of today was, you know, what happens when someone dies? And the doctor did touch on this briefly. If the patient was on hospice, we asked the patient to call the family to call hospice immediately. And somebody does have to legally pronounce the patient, and one of our nurses will come and legally pronounce the patient and give a time. If the person is at home and not on hospice, oftentimes the state does require that, again, they do need to be legally pronounced, and sometimes the only way to do that is by calling 911. And somebody already mentioned this. If you do call 911, be sure to have your DNR documents at the ready, because medtechs EMTs are trained to get people alive, to do CPR. So be very careful to do that. You'd also want to call the mortuary. Hopefully you have chosen the mortuary ahead of time also. And call a priest. I'm not going to get into detail about COVID-19 because that adds a whole different layer to what we're talking about. But right now, priests are not very available to go places. But even in normal times, know ahead of time which priest you would like, or which association you would like, organization, to do the service. For most of us here today, and Indian families and Westerns, we would go for cremation. So you would want to have that arranged ahead of time, but call the cremation service when the death happens. And also call the patient's doctor and just let them know. For anybody who is in the military, veterans organizations will often provide financial assistance if needed, and also certain rituals that can be done at a memorial service, such as having the flag, playing taps. And for some patients and families, that's very important, so make sure to call. And after about 10 days, you will get a copy of the death certificate, and then you would want to notify people like Social Security, banks, insurance companies. So I was looking online for a resource. Our website has a lot of these resources on, but to my amazement, one of the best is at Consumer Reports, consumerreports.org, what to do when a loved one dies. And it is a very thorough and long, detailed list of everything that you need to do when someone dies. I don't know how many of our participants are from India and how it happens there, but I'm sure ask your local hospice or hospital, or Google something online, make sure obviously that they are reputable. So next slide. So after someone has died, I want to stress throughout here that grief is unique to every person. No two people grieve the same way. But these are some of the things that one can expect. To begin with, even if the person has been ill for many, many years, there is an element of shock. What we say to people is, we know this death is not a surprise, but when you finally see your loved one and that essence, that prana has left the body, there is a different level of awareness. There is that shock that truly this person is not here anymore. And also a death of hope. You'd be amazed how many families, even when the person is very, very ill on hospice, there's always that shred of hope. Maybe there's one more clinical trial that can come along. For Christian families, maybe a miracle. When someone is truly gone, that hope has gone too. And that really impacts people. Anger, people can be very angry at God or at the healthcare system. Guilt and regret, Mahua, you talked about that. It is so common. I'm so sorry for your loss, Mahua. I'm so sorry you feel that guilt. My experience is that that will ease in time, that regret and guilt will ease. Very normal that you're feeling it, especially under the circumstances. Okay, so I wish you the best. For some people, if they have been caring for somebody who's had Parkinson's disease, for instance, for 10 years, and they've been caring for them, there is an enormous sense of relief. Some people can feel guilty about that, but the truth is it's a relief for the patient and the caregiver that they are no longer suffering. And then there are the kind of deaths where grandpa is 98 years old, he's had a rich life, he is very ready to go, the family is at peace, they're very ready, and everyone is calm. But there are possible physical reactions that happen to most people. Forgetfulness, this kind of fuzzy-headedness that can happen, a lowered immune system, trouble sleeping, difficulty concentrating, irritability, again, that feeling of being kind of a raw nerve. Very, very normal. It happens to most people. One of the things I encourage is for people to please be patient with yourselves and with each other when you go through these things. People sometimes think grief is just feeling sad, but there are social and financial implications. Husband and wife had dinner with the same two couples for 20 years. One of them dies. And so that remaining one person is now in a different relationship with those people. If the husband dies, will she continue going to that dinner? Will everybody feel awkward? What is her role now? Maybe she'll not do that anymore and isolate. And I think you can think of many other social situations where that could happen. Finances, the same couple, the husband took care of the finances all their married life for 60 years, paid the bills, he dies, suddenly that all falls on the wife, that feeling of overwhelm. Hopefully there are family members who can pick up the slack, but still there's a sense that the stability she had of somebody who took care of the finances has gone. Grief is a roller coaster. It is up and down. Some people say to me, I feel like I'm going crazy. And I say to them, it feels that way, but believe me, you're not. And you know, there are things you can do to ease that feeling. I think it's important to know that unlike depression, grief has this roller coaster element. Depression is like a cloud that is constantly overhead, grief comes and goes. The two can go together, but I think it's important to know the difference. People sometimes say to me, when will this end? Grief really never ends. It just changes, it goes to the background, and grief becomes a source of remembering rather than a source of pain. It does make a difference if it's an expected versus unexpected loss. The death of a child, for instance, is one of the most painful deaths. I'm actually working with a family right now. Very, very painful. It is not what one expects. It is somehow life turned topsy-turvy, like it shouldn't happen that way. Sadly, it does. And then we talk about disenfranchised death, when somebody commits suicide or has a drug overdose. This has social implications because people don't know how to relate to you. You know, what do I say to the person? There may be guilt involved. And I'm not going to go in depth here, but there is a lot of information out about how people go through grief when their loved one has died this way. Next slide. So I think grief is overall really misunderstood. But let's look at a few different cultural and religious diversity of grief. There are different cultural and religious rituals. Some religions, like Hinduism and Islam, wash the body. If I suggest that to a Christian family, they are like, oh my gosh, no. So it's very much part of the culture. And to be aware of that, if you're working or talking with other people who are going through grief, to be very, and for caregivers and medical community too, to be very sensitive to the differences here. When it comes to memorial services, and I just looked this up recently, in this country, in a Christian or Jewish service, oftentimes the photos are fine. People will generally wear black. As I understand, in India and Indian families, obviously, or I understand that the traditional color is white. So again, we want to remain sensitive if we are going to participate in a service or memorial, to be sensitive with how other people grieve. There are traditions around the length of time. In the Jewish tradition, people sit Shiva for 7 days, which is kind of awake, but they don't put the headstone up until a year after the death. I know in Hindu traditions, it's usually 10 to 30 days. And there are other traditions that you would know much more than I do. The thing that is a pet peeve of mine is that US employers think that bereavement can be done in 1 to 3 days. That's the time you get off and you're expected to get back to normal. So I don't know that that will ever change, but sadly that's the case. Grief within a family, sometimes it can make a difference if there are different faiths within the same family, how they grieve. If they use prayer in their grief, if an atheist person obviously will not use prayer. So again, within families, to be very understanding and sensitive of how different faiths affect the grief process. Multiple losses can affect how people grieve. An old loss that wasn't resolved can be triggered when somebody dies anew. And especially if there's been a lot of losses in a family, it can complicate the new loss. Any pre-existing conditions like depression or mental illness obviously can complicate things. And while this is often said many different ways, men are different than women, and men do tend to grieve differently than women. They are more likely to be the karma yogi who will go and fix somebody's roof for them as a way of honoring or showing their grief, whereas a woman will talk, look at photos. So again, just to be aware. And children's grief is very much age-related. Next slide. So I'm going to touch very briefly on this. The theory of grief people are most aware of, I think, is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She came out with the 5 stages of grief. Her theory has pretty much been debunked now. Not that these 5 things don't happen, but there are many more very nuanced, much more nuanced approaches to grief that I think can be a little more helpful. Therese Rando is someone who has done this very well. And George Bonanno is a little controversial, but he believes that we are all a lot more resilient than maybe therapists or grief professionals think we are, and that grief can transform us, and that laughter and joy can be as much a part of grief as sadness and tears. Next slide. So these are the 6 R's that Dr. Rando talks about. Again, there's much more online about these if you want to get more information. The first 3 R's have to do with recognizing the loss and separating from the person who has died. And the second 3, the last 3, talk about letting go of the old assumptive world and readjusting into a new world. Not forgetting the old world, but you develop a new relationship to the person that's internal, that exists in conversations you have with family members, that exists in the photographs and the memories. And then you want to reinvest emotional energy into new people, new goals. One of the things that I think was the most transformative that I can think of, the woman who founded Mothers Against Drunk Driving, her daughter was killed by a drunk driver. One of the ways she handled her grief that was so transformative was to start this organization that has helped literally thousands of families since that time. Next slide. So this is kind of some of the practicalities. The first year is always the hardest. You have to go through the first birthday, the first anniversary. If you celebrate Christmas, the first Christmas, or whatever other big celebrations you have in your family. And what I always recommend to people is be really intentional about this. Sometimes people think, oh, on his birthday, all I want to do is go to bed and put a pillow over my head. Try not to do that. Try to be intentional, to have a gathering, to write him a birthday card, bake a cake. If you don't feel you can do that with other people, with your family, can you do something on your own? It really helps people move through grief to have this intentional activity. This is where you become a karma yogi. You're taking action. Most people feel compelled to tell their story again and again. That is perfectly normal. Just make a list of friends of those who are good listeners and find people who can truly listen. Some people like to engage in journaling, poetry, gardening, again, anything where you're taking action. Of course, we can engage in prayer and meditation practice, japa, mantra meditation. And the secular mindfulness meditation research has been done to show that it does impact some of the symptoms that are associated with grief, lowering your anxiety, boosting your immune system, improving sleep. So that's something that also is available. Stay active. And we always advise people don't make any major life changes for the first 12 months. Too much going on with you emotionally and physically. You want to be in a calmer place before you make those decisions. Next. So some people, everybody needs support when they go through grief, and there's different ways of doing it. Beyond your families or your spiritual center, there are grief groups. There are many of them around through faith communities, senior centers, YMCAs. Doesn't take long to research this, to ask around. Right now, there are some you can do virtually by Zoom or phone. I think even when this current crisis is over, I have a feeling these will be more available for people. And there's numerous Facebook groups and chat rooms and websites, meetup groups. I even actually Googled to see if there were any meetup groups in India, and indeed there are. So this is international. Facebook groups are often by the kind of loss. They're usually private groups that you join with people who have suffered a similar loss. Most hospices, hospitals, and funeral homes offer bereavement support, as we do. I offer bereavement support for up to a year after someone has died. Part of my role would be to recommend a bereavement group if I feel it appropriate, or I will meet people one-on-one. If people do feel the need of a therapist or have the resources, I recommend to find a therapist who does specialize in grief. And one of the wonderful things we have available, I know the US, Canada, and the UK have them, I'm not sure about India, are bereavement camps for children. They are usually free or close to free. They are generally 3 days in some beautiful place at a camp somewhere. And it's a place where kids have an opportunity to bond with other children who have gone through a similar loss. And they are really wonderful for kids. Next. So I'm going to whip through this pretty quickly because I know we don't have a lot of time. But children, their level of grief and how they acknowledge or understand death changes depending on their age. At this age, they see death as temporary, and they believe the person will come back. They will usually need a daily routine and structure, reassurance, and that's sometimes hard for families whose structure has been kind of dismantled because of a death, but kids at this age really need it. Next slide. At this age, kids begin to understand that death is final and permanent. They may feel some guilt and blame themselves for the death. You know, the last time I saw grandma, I didn't tell her I loved her. So, you know, maybe I caused her to die because I didn't tell her I loved her. So one of the things we encourage is for families to be very communicative with their children, and also to not use euphemisms. Don't say, oh, grandma went to sleep. Because you know what could happen the next time that child goes to the bedroom and wants to go to sleep. Oh, if I go to sleep now, am I going to die? So don't use euphemisms. Grandma died. We're all very sad. Make sure that you're telling them as much of the truth as they can handle. At this age, school responsibilities and outcomes may be affected. So at all ages, I recommend talking to school counselors. There are always counselors at schools, universities. Make sure that they know so they too can intervene if necessary, and just keep an eye on the child. I keep wanting to forward it from my own computer. Okay, next. At this age, they recognize death is irreversible. They may view death as a punishment. So again, talking to the child, giving them an opportunity to express is really important. And the pre-adolescent may swing back and forth between wanting support from the family and wanting support from their peers. Important for the family to really allow that. The child may find much more comfort talking to their friends than to their parents. Next. At this age, nearing the adult conception of death, and they may question religious beliefs. I mean, this happens at this age a great deal anyway. Could happen a lot more when they're facing a death. They can often be angry at the deceased for leaving. And acting out behaviors at this age can be a little more worrisome. It can include increased drug use, increased sexual activity, risk-taking, even suicidal ideation. So really important at this age, again, to make sure school counselors are aware and just be very mindful of what your teen is going through. Next. So I haven't wanted to focus on this because hopefully this pandemic will pass at some point. But the coronavirus has interrupted grief. Even if a patient did not have COVID-19, did not die of that infection, if they were in a nursing home that's under lockdown and died there, the family has not been able to go to visit or to say goodbye, especially if the person has dementia and can't talk on the phone. This creates an enormous layer of an additional type of grief for the family. Inability to travel. People have been less able to travel to see ill relatives. For a while, inability to travel for memorial services. That's opening up a little bit. And restrictions on the size of gatherings. Funeral homes are allowing a maximum of 10, sometimes not even that many. And how do you have a full-fledged celebration of life with all your dozens of hundreds of friends under these circumstances? Many people are delaying it, but again, it's a sort of irritation and interruption of the normal mourning. And we think of this as when you have grief, such as the trauma of this, you get into what we call complicated grief, which just means that people have a little more difficulty moving through. They may need a little more support as they go through it. Next. So just lastly, I want to stress that grief is a normal, natural response to loss. It is unique to each person. Everybody does it differently. It takes as long as it takes. Some people get through their initial deep grief very quickly, and for others it can take almost a lifetime. But we hope that, as you saw from the 6 R's, that people can move through enough that they can invest in their new life without that person. It can transform you, as we've talked about, and it is possible. Some people feel they're always going to feel this heaviness, this grief, this sadness. It is possible to move through, to find new life, new joy, never forgetting the person, but treasuring them in your heart, treasuring the memories that you have of them. So I think, is that it? I think that's it. Oh, I just put these resources up. Swami, we can put these up on the website, I think. Some great resources that will help you, a couple of books and some online resources as well.
Thank you, Jillian, for this wonderful presentation.